for a woman to be pregnant is a threat to their leadership?
When a woman is going through IVF, it is extremely difficult emotionally and physically. We go through a lot of hormonal changes, anxiety during this time, and so there is a chance that we can't bring our best to work, but we do our best to moderate that and still deliver results. When I found out about my first miscarriage, it was because I went in for my 6-week scan. At that point, the sonographer told me that although there was a heartbeat, it was not strong enough to survive. A miscarriage isn't something that just happens in a vacuum and like suddenly a woman's having one and change your mindset from being pregnant to not pregnant and you get over it. It's not like that. And I had to go back to work out of that appointment waiting for my baby to die. Women still show up at work knowing that this thing inside of them is passing away. And I'm not the only one who goes through that. And it happened to me twice. The time I had my second miscarriage and I went in for that dreaded scan and it happened to me again, I had to have surgery to have the baby taken out. It's not just, yep, I'm pregnant. No, I'm not pregnant. I'm going to get over it. It's like you have this impending doom and you just go about your business like nothing ever happened.
Hello, my name is Rugare Gomo, and I am your high performance business and leadership coach. This show exists to inspire and empower you to dream, forge your own path, and be the leader of your life. And today, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to Natalie Khoo. Hi, Natalie.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. Now, I've been so excited to have this conversation with you. We met probably 8 years ago.
Yeah.
That's where our paths crossed in the entrepreneurial world. I think I was just starting out my law firm at that time, and I think you came to one of the seminars and we had a conversation then.
Yeah, you have a lot of talented women in your network, and I think I was maybe doing some work with them at the time. So there you go.
It's amazing. And now today you have actually grown your business and you've been in your business for over 15 years. So I want to just read your bio and really let people know who you are. So Natalie is the proud founder of Avion, a team of content specialists that deliver intuitive digital experiences across financial services, tech, and health. Since launching her business 15 years ago, she has built a diverse client portfolio featuring startups in the United States to some of Australia's biggest clients. They all have one thing in common: a commitment to clear customer-facing communications. Her expertise includes content strategy, content audits, content design, SEO, and UX copywriting and optimization for websites, and content marketing asset creation. So everything content, Natalie is your go-to person. Amongst it all, Natalie is a twin mom who recently advocates for women at work, drawing upon her lived experience as an Asian Australian female entrepreneur and the fact she has endured 5 rounds of IVF and 2 miscarriages while running a business across 3 continents. She's passionate about normalizing the juggle that women go through during their careers. Wow.
Yeah, I think I've really found a sweet spot in the last few years talking about and opening up about what it's like for women to have to juggle not only motherhood, which everyone knows is a challenge, but trying to get pregnant as well and start a family. And there's so much more to it than people, I guess, that you grow up and you realize. And I don't want to just sit here and say it's not talked about enough because yes, that's one problem, but I think there needs to be, I guess, a bit more acceptance of or acknowledgement of how real it is and the real gritty stuff that happens along the way as well. It's not just like mothers have it tough. Well, you know, you've got to hear some of those stories about women self-injecting hormones in the toilets at business events like me to really feel like, hang on, yeah, this stuff is happening under our noses every day.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm so drawn to you about, that real openness and willingness to share your story because, you are literally running a business and raising the next generation. But I know, I feel like as business owners, And even as a business community, we fail to create those safe spaces, those empowering spaces for women and people like you to really win and thrive and have it all. So I'm so thrilled that you get to share, your backstory and what it has been like, because I know people who are listening will absolutely resonate with what you've got to share today.
I think we all grow up, in some ways, feminism is a bit of a curse because we grow up thinking we can do it all. The reality is we can't do it all at the same time. So there just needs to be an adjustment in our expectations or we need to self-manage how we go about trying to be high achievers while society tries to catch up.
It's fascinating you say that because one of my favorite authors, Gabo Mate, he is a psychologist and a doctor as well, and talks a lot about trauma. One of the things he has said in his research is in modern day society, there's this expectation women to have it all, but then but doing it by themselves. Where in the past, when our community was available to support, the idea of having it all in today's society is connected with doing it alone versus the idea of having it all, but with huge support networks to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I probably would like to start the session chatting to you just by putting out a bit of a trigger warning to any women who might be listening that I will be covering some pretty tough topics that are based on my own lived experience of fertility struggles as well as pregnancy loss. So just wanted to put that out there in case, you're listening to this on a train and it might be a bit emotional for you. So yeah, just a heads up there.
Thank you, Natalie, for creating that space for all the people who are listening today. So let's go to your backstory. You are an Asian Australian.
Yeah, that itself is
And
hard enough.
it's such a big conversation. Even that itself could be the entire podcast.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
where we're going to start today is you said at one stage you were desperately unemployed, and then you launched your business at 26. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, why were you desperately unemployed, and what led you to
Well,
launching your business?
after I finished my studies, I worked for a few years professionally, which was great, but then I went on a working holiday and I decided to come back after I think I was about maybe 12 months or so later, and I couldn't find a job. So this was in 2009 during what we call the global financial crisis or the recession. And because I couldn't get a job, I just decided I'll work for myself. But in the end, that was a blessing because I ended up building a great team and managing some fantastic clients in the end, and it kind of just unraveled from there to where it is today.
Extraordinary. And how did you know what to create? Like, what what
Oh,
inspired you to create what you created?
a lot of trial and error. So I come from a magazine publishing background. So I've always loved content. But I think just going out there, talking to people, seeing what people were willing to pay for. I initially started out trying to pitch journalism. And in the end, people were like, oh, can you write my website? And it just meant that, of course, you go where the biggest problems are to solve for people. And so I ended up creating content for people's brands.
What you're saying is very powerful because a lot of the time today, what I hear is follow your passion, follow your passion. But this is what you said. You said, I went to discover what people would pay for, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. This isn't a hobby. It's a you got to make a living. Of course, you don't want to sell your soul and do something that you don't enjoy, but that's I think part of finding, what you're passionate about. You trial it's kind of trial and error, and then you go from there to decide what you think you could enjoy doing and make a living out of versus maybe what isn't really up your alley.
I completely relate. I think when our paths crossed, I was running the law firm Simbisa Law. And, I really have a passion, of course, in helping entrepreneurs and building their businesses. But what I discovered was that I loved the leadership part the most when I was doing the strategy workshops, talking about, having amazing business relationships. And so that was part of my path to being a full-time business and leadership coach, and people wanting to pay for that as well.
I, I think a lot of people think about entrepreneurship or self-employment or freelancing as, this big business case that they need to put forward and they have to have a bulletproof plan. But the reality is, yeah, everyone evolves over time. And just like you said, Rugare, you started off doing law and now you're doing coaching. And, you just look at what skills you have, and sometimes they're transferable to something that is better suited to you and better suited to what the market needs.
Mm. And what is so inspiring is you've had Avion for 15 years, Natalie. Most businesses fail in the first 5 years. 4 out of 5 businesses, they say, fail. 15 years. So, how have you accomplished being in business for 15 years? And more so, you are Asian Australian female. How does that come into the mix?
I think starting young was, in my mid 20s has been useful because you don't go into starting a business with already the commitments of a mortgage and children. You don't have to be the provider or the breadwinner at home. So that takes a lot of pressure off, and all the mistakes you make are kind of with your own cash that comes and goes when you're in your younger years. Doesn't mean it's easy, of course, but I definitely empathize with people who maybe wait a little bit longer when they've got a bit more confidence or skills to build their own business, and maybe they're not able to take as many risks, and they can't commit as much time. So, yeah, how I've managed to continue the business for 15 years. I've learned a lot along the way about hiring people, managing people, helping clients, solving problems, not just content problems, but people problems. um, I've worked with coaches over the years, of all different types, but really, I think I'm maybe a bit of a prolific business book reader and just try and reflect on my learnings as much as I can, and set goals along the way.
It's very powerful. And I think this is very important for people who are listening to hear this. It's not just one thing. I think a lot of the time we're trying to find a hack for success. My experience is that there isn't a hack. I have to really do the real work and remain in the game. And for you, you remained in the game. You learned about business. You had coaches. You read books, and you've been tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. You know.
Yeah, and there are some days where you're like, oh, I just want to throw all of this in the bin. And that's completely normal too. And I still have those days, of course. But you just stack up what your options are. And I think the most powerful thing is knowledge, right? If you kind of decide, okay, well, this is my current situation and this is the grass on the other side. It might look greener now, but what am I really going to be giving up and what will I be moving towards? And if you think that your priorities have changed and you want what the grass offers, then go across. But I guess in my situation, I've just tried to redefine my definition of success over the last few years. So, when you're in the early stages, it might be just I want to land my first big client, or I want to build a team of like, 3 or 5 best friends, and we're going to go out for after work drinks every night. But then when you get older, you think, okay, well, I want to set myself up for success, or I want to win the next contract, or I want to fix this problem, or I want to start doing more pro bono work because you can afford it. And so your priorities shift to maybe making more impact. But then obviously, as you take on more commitments like family, then your priorities might shift to money. So, and flexibility. So you can, spend time with your kids when you need to and log off at 5 p.m. So if you're able to redefine your business to make it work for you rather than the other way around, which is terribly simplistic, but I do really pay attention to those kinds of things along the way. So changes that I've made over time are things like how much I might travel at work, how many days I work, how many long weekends I take a year. And probably the most recent one is how much I pay myself because um, especially as a mother with limited time and capacity, and I I just was kind of drowning in a lot of financial insecurity, and paying myself market rate was probably one of the best decisions I've made this year. It sounds so trivial, but it actually has taken a huge weight off my shoulders to kind of know. And it means that you don't go down this black hole of wishing you were doing something else because everyone else's job seems better paid and easier than yours, you know?
Absolutely. And what you're saying is so powerful and important because I went through the same process too, where I never paid myself, the market rate. I always paid everybody else market rate or more. And I was always the
Yes,
last to pay myself until I
every
read this
business owner
book.
does it.
Yeah, completely. And my mindset shifted when I read this book called Profit First by Mike Milakowski. And it practically changed my life because it said, take your profit first, and then, the whole business must be able to run on what is left over, which business owners do the reverse. Income comes through minus revenue, then profit. But the principle here is income comes through, take your profit and create a sustainable, wondrous business that way.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And the other thing that I'd love to explore is, as a Black gay Australian, Zimbabwean Australian, or African Australian, I have found it at times very hard to break into different spaces in what I will say white corporate Australia to build my credibility, to build trust. Um, and, growing up in Zimbabwe, they always say the context I was raised is it's always going to be 10 times harder as a Black
Mm,
person to make it in a white man's world. You're Asian Australian. If I didn't
yeah.
even see you, I'd just think you're Aussie. I wouldn't even put Asian in there. But you are an Asian Australian woman. How have you built a business being an Asian Australian woman?
So yeah, also being quite young, I think one of the things that I really lent into was, well, I can't compete with all these white men in suits. What can I do different, right? And what can I own that I know that someone else can't do? And that's tough when you're young and you're female, but I think at the time, let's say 15 years ago, people didn't know as much about the internet as they do now, and especially social media or being able to understand website development and design. So I think being able to do as much research as I possibly could on understanding the industry to say, look, I'm a young person. I know how this stuff works. Mind you, if you ask me now, like I'm so embarrassed I don't really understand TikTok. But
Yeah.
this is what's happening at the time,
Yes.
what I would say to someone who's in their mid-20s now starting business, I'd say,
Mm,
you go and own all that stuff that I have no idea how to do. You go become a
mm,
TikTok creator. So you just really identify what there is. And then I think about being female, I'm like, okay, well, how can that work in my favor? Well, I'm a good listener. I suppose I'm a good communicator. I have good emotional intelligence. And as I said at the start, I think building relationships is really important to good business. And so I guess that's kind of how I built my business from there. The Asian side, I think I don't really know what to say about that part other than that's where my hardworking um, I guess ethic
mm.
comes from.
Yes.
Seeing coming from an ethnic family where traditionally we're all about hard work, not necessarily desk jobs. My parents always worked in hospitality, and I don't come from some kind of fancy privileged home with a lot of, old money from banking or mining or whatever it is. Similar to many ethnic families or, young people from those families, we just know the value of hard work and we just get done.
Absolutely. I look forward to a day when this conversation becomes redundant altogether and we see you for who you are completely. That I completely related to what you were sharing. For me, I discovered that I'm like you, being a good listener, but also I'm good at being a safe space to hold people's secrets. And maybe that's where, being a lawyer came into it. There's privileged confidential information. So for me, I trained to be a vault. And surprisingly, I discovered that people from all walks of life and all sexual orientations would come to me sharing their secrets. And it became that space for them to grow. But I didn't know that about me. It's something I had to discover and own it for myself in any
Yeah,
case.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think the other thing about being, a business person, just to add here, is when you're at the top of the game, like you're at the top of the game and you keep growing. And I see this with people like Beyonce, Rihanna, even Katy Perry. I go to the musicians because I admire these women so much. You have no idea. And and it's like when I look at them, in the end, there's this like equalizing game where if you're the best, people are just going to want to work with you irrespective of your nationality, your sexual orientation. If you've got something to give, people let go of their prejudices a lot of the time. That's been
Mm,
what my experience is. Has that been part of your experience?
mm. Um, Gosh, when it comes down to breaking down prejudices, I think that I don't know. I guess growing up in Australia, I've always seen myself as someone who can play on a level playing field, but just trying to use certain things to my advantage.
Yes.
And maybe being more acutely aware of people who might perceive my weaknesses as a female or a young person, or maybe Asian, not white, as the kinds of people that I don't necessarily want to be around. Or on the flip side, people that I can influence. So, on the
Love
odd
it.
occasion, I do, in my career, of course, I've come across white men in suits that I feel are really patronizing, that I often challenge them. And sometimes I push a little, or sometimes I choose to walk away. So, you know, choose your battles, right? But it's all, I think, yeah, if you've got the resilience to kind of just give business ownership a go, you probably have the smarts to read a room and understand people in a way that knowing whether they'll support you or not.
It's very powerful what you said. My mom once asked me the question when I started my business. It's like, why would anybody want to work with a black gay person in Australia? And I said to my mom, I don't know because those people are not coming to me for business. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all it takes is one or two advocates to then, who really believe in you to
Mm,
recommend you to someone else, and
mm.
that's how good business goes.
It's powerful, absolutely powerful. And I think, I hope everybody who's listening, the message is don't worry about what everybody else opinion or prejudices are. Take on creating your business. Find who's going to pay for your services. Like Natalie said, there's that mixture of passion and, being paid, and just go for it. And everything of who you are and who you're not can be and is an advantage. There's opportunity
Mhm.
in it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Powerful.
Focus on doing good work. The rest will follow if you're getting paid.
Ah, I love it. Focus on doing good work and the rest will follow and get paid.
Yes,
Get
yes.
paid. Now, I'd love to explore the other aspect of your life. So you are a mother to twins.
Yes. So the real juicy stuff here that I want to talk about, there are probably three key areas of motherhood that I feel like I should talk about. And, I hope to share my story in a way that I think if there are any other women listening, whether they have been part of that journey, they're in the journey, they're beyond the journey, whatever it is, everyone will be able to resonate because if it's not them, it'll be someone they know. So it's more just not, I'm not here to create a pity party. It's more just, hey, let's just make someone feel who's going through this like we see them and someone else knows what they're going through. So I kind of look at three phases of my life when I look at my work and my career as a mother. And probably the first is the decision to have children. The second would be the challenges trying to have children. And the third would be the work-life juggle once you have children. And I hope that maybe sharing a bit of my backstory that we've discussed kind of sets the scene for any high-performing woman out there who has also thought about these challenges.
Amazing.
Shall I just kind of jump in and talk about the first one?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So it's quite interesting if we talk about the first paradigm, which is the decision to have children. I actually never thought I wanted kids. And this is because I come from a very, working class family. My parents were never home. I'm the eldest of three kids. And as a result, I kind of was the primary caretaker in many ways, where I would, in my senior years, I would collect my brother and my sister from school, take them to tutoring or swimming while I would do all the grocery shopping. And then I would have to go home. I'd do all the cooking and the cleaning and make sure they did their homework and put them to bed. My brother was only like 5 years old at the time. So, or like, quite young. And my sister would have been maybe around 11. So I just thought, gosh, being a parent sucks. Like, who wants to look after kids? So I thought, I never want to have this type of commitment. Obviously, I stuck it out, supported my parents until I moved out. But, I guess my feelings about wanting to have children changed when I met my now husband, James. He really wanted to have kids, and I saw a real commitment there. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I can change my mind. Of course, that was a massive confrontation with my life at the time because I love my work and the impact that that has on your career is enormous. And think about all of the women who not only have one child, but go back for two or three, whether that's, planned or not. There are some women who are literally taking they might even take out a decade of their career when, we live in a society that celebrates like career progression, yet you've got to stop and pause every few years. Anyway, I just found it really hard to digest. Okay, well, if I'm going to have children, how is my business going to survive? It's not like I work at a big company where all of my maternity leave benefits are going to be super cushy. I needed to plan for this. I needed to ask myself, okay, how do I delegate? Will my staff survive without me? Will my clients continue on? And financially, how can I afford to do this and pay myself? So I think, yeah, my unique perspective that I bring to this podcast is that I'm not just here to talk about how difficult it is to be a woman planning a family and at a time where her career is at an all-time high. I also like to bring the perspective of a business owner that has a lot of responsibility and I have to pay myself. I do feel personally that the government has really poor support. It's quite embarrassing, really. If you look at Australia's government or federal maternity leave policy, it is minimum wage for about 5 months. Now, minimum wage is about $183 a day. And I want to take this opportunity to point out that the average woman's salary in Victoria is about $90,000. So that's more than double than $183 a day, or just
Mhm.
under, sorry, double. So the fact that the government expects women to live off half their normal wage or their normal living expenses with a baby and raise a child is just absolutely beyond me. And if you compare this to Norway, for example, Norway covers a woman's full salary for a year.
Mm.
So, they don't have to worry about that gap. Now, obviously, if you work in Australia for a big company, like a bank or a government organization, they often have great parental and maternal leave policies which cover the gap, but not everybody can afford to do that, especially small businesses like mine. As a result, I do think that the government also fails small business owners because I can't attract women in childbearing ages to work for my company. So it is a bit of a vicious circle that I wish the Australian government reconsidered. That minimum wage expectation. I think it's not enough. And I needed to think about in my situation, okay, well, what did I need to pay myself while on maternity leave to cover all of my expenses that $183 a day would not cover? And so, of course, what did I do? I mapped out a bit of a plan financially, and I hate maths. So I will just point out there that, like, I did not have fun doing this. But yeah, I calculated all of my expenses and figured out, okay, well, if I want to take 6 months off, I need to save $40,000. If I want to take 12 months off, I have to save $60,000. So I think just, again, kind of knowledge is power, being able to say, okay, well, this is my situation. This is how much I need. This is how I'm going to make it work. And if not, if all else fails, I can just get a job, right? So
Yeah,
having
yeah.
plan A, B, C, and D is kind of how I got through it. I was able to save up some money, see myself through financially during that time when eventually it happened. But yes, I do feel like women are let down by, the maternity leave policies here in Australia. The expectations of this country on women being able to afford having kids is quite skewed in the
It's
wrong.
awful. It's absolutely awful. And, I'm a small business owner myself, and like you, nearly all my team are working moms or get pregnant and have children. And I love them so much. They teach me so much. And as a small business owner, I'm not actually required to make any maternity payments. But as
Hmm.
a company, we actually made a decision to actually plan for that, and my team members also then got payments, because as well, because we're in this together as business owners. Like we're in a community, an ecosystem, and unfortunately, what the government has created doesn't really uplift women. It doesn't uplift families. We need to be doing better, in
Yes,
this regard.
it
So
just it just disappoints me because, yeah, as small business owners, I think it's amazing that you've budgeted some money each year to go towards parental leave in your profit and loss statement. But it is really hard to just come up with a few $1,000s when you are, counting every dollar as a small business owner. We already want to pay people what they're worth. We already have, like, think of cost of living and then cost of running a business as well. I would love to one day be able to say, oh, guess what? The government gave me a grant of X thousand dollars to support working mums. Oh my God,
oh
wouldn't
my
that be
God.
amazing? And, the reason why a lot of women choose to work at smaller businesses is actually not necessarily because they're pushed. Um, sorry, not because they choose to work at small businesses, but often they are pushed into working for smaller businesses because bigger companies don't give them the flexibility that they need, and they prefer to work with smaller organizations that are a bit more personable to flexible hours. And so they still make a sacrifice there. They make a sacrifice on the big corporate dollars and the cushy maternity leave to work for someone like you or me.
It's heartbreaking. It makes me really sad because there's the ongoing impact as well to like superannuation and preparing for retirement as well. And it's just small-minded thinking. And this can
Yes,
be easily fixed.
yes. And, I really, this is such a big topic. And I know that there are many, many socioeconomic problems that Australia needs to address, but this particular one, like the impacts, the flow-on effects it could have for women, like escaping domestic violence, like that's a massive one. Like if women were more financially independent, they weren't stuck at home earning nothing and no super, while their husbands had all the financial security, therefore could be the emotional abuser. Like these are situations that impact massive, massive problems.
Absolutely. And, I think as a society, we're so slow to really understand how economic empowerment, for women, economic empowerment for minority cultural groups is so critical for actually the prosperity and the health of a nation, in essence. People think it's optional.
I just don't understand why so many countries in Europe have incredible full maternity leave pay policies that are government backed, yet so many like considered first world nations don't. It's so strange. I mean, the US would be one of the biggest countries that everyone knows is supposedly progressive, yet has the worst maternity leave, like zero maternity leave policy. So
And
there you go.
and I sometimes think this whole divide between first world, developing world is all marketing. I think we now really need to look at what does this all really mean at the level of empowerment, self-esteem, happiness of a society rather than just economic
Mm,
dollars and GDP.
yeah.
Yeah.
I So, once I'd made the decision to have kids and started thinking, okay, well, how am I going to afford this? How can my business run? Which was, something that I considered over the course of many years. When I finally decided, let's go, of course, having a baby is not as easy as having sex without a condom. And I feel this is basically what we're told as children, like as teenagers, and it's like, oh my
So
God.
easy.
Women spend their entire lives being told not to get pregnant, and then suddenly, when we're in our 30s and 40s, we're all struggling to get pregnant. And sorry, that's a generalization, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And I feel like, being indoctrinated with this lie means that we're constantly, we as in women, in their later in their careers, trying to start families, we're always disappointed and feel like failures. And it's
Mm.
really hard. It's really hard to reconcile those feelings. Um, so my story is I went through back-to-back IVF for just under a year and a half. So that was January 2021. I really kind of started till April 2022 when I got pregnant with my now twin boys, who are almost two. So to open up a little on my IVF roller coaster, um, many women undergo IVF for actually a really, really long time. And that's because many women like to not like, but they pace it out over a longer period because it is so emotionally and physically taxing and not cheap. But I wanted to get results really quickly. I just was like, let's hustle this along. So, in the space of like a very short amount of time, I'm just going to give you a few figures to wrap your head around. Um, so I had five major surgeries, about 29 eggs collected, 26 embryos lost, I had three embryos created, but I had two miscarriages. I probably had 44 or so injections in my tummy, some of which were in public bathrooms, in work settings. Probably more than 800 vitamins and about $70,000.
No, Natalie, nobody talks about this in this detail.
Yeah, it's because we all just want to push it away.
Oh my God.
Look, some women are lucky to go through IVF, and I won't say lucky because no one is lucky doing IVF, but they might be successful on their first or second round. I think in my situation, we really persisted and we were fortunate to have some financial backing from my husband, whose dad unfortunately passed away during this time. And we took some of that inheritance money to put towards this process. So
Mm,
he unfortunately never got to meet the boys, which is
mm,
extremely sad, but he
mm,
obviously played a critical part in helping us get
mm,
there. So for financial reasons too, many people stop.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I think I just want to get real with like what some of those what some of that looked like. And I've
Yes.
already mentioned the self-injecting of hormones. And I need to maybe point out for those who don't know, when you need to inject yourself with hormones for IVF, they have to be at very specific times. And that's why you might hear women say, oh, I had to do it in the toilet at work
Hmm.
because we can't just do it at home. And sometimes we're expected to be in the office. So you just bring them with you in your bag, in a little freezer bag, pretend it's your lunch, and
Mm.
you just have to sneak off. So this is happening all of the time. But some other memories of mine are like waking up from general anesthetic on a hospital bed, trying to deal with like an extremely unreasonable and demanding client who I don't work with anymore.
Yeah.
While like I'd signed a waiver saying I wouldn't make any important decisions or anything because legally, you're not supposed to when you've come out of anesthetic. Um, but when you run a business, nothing can wait. So
Mm.
I just tried to. I was like lying there with my phone, like, get it together. Just answer this
Wow.
email, just jump on the phone and then just hold it together. And yeah, like that's the kind of stuff that women do. And we don't even know that this is happening under our noses all the time. I also had this situation where during my second, no, sorry, it was my first pregnancy loss,
Mhm.
and I was having one of the most stressful situations I've had ever at work, where one of my senior staff was giving me a really hard time. She wasn't happy about some of the decisions I'd made in the business and kind of was, I guess, accusing me of maybe letting her down or letting the team down. Also because I wasn't, necessarily across everything all of the time. I think something that business owners have to do really well is they have to know how to prioritize. We can't juggle everything all of the time, but we know what's urgent and not urgent, and we just focus on the what must do.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, unless you're a business owner, you don't always get that. So occasionally we let a ball or two drop, but it's not of consequence in our eyes. But maybe it's not that big a deal to other people. Of course, we're not talking about negatively impacting other people's well-being here. We're just
Mhm.
talking about like, you know, whether we emailed somebody at a certain time,
Yes.
for example. And so I was in the middle of having this miscarriage, and this female staff member of mine, it just really was extremely traumatic because she also knew what I was going through, but still just tested me to fix this problem or like acknowledge how she was feeling. And it just was a quite toxic situation. Um, and yeah, I just, it's not like I expected any special treatment for being open with her about what I was going through. But I think it just proves that in the moment, unless you're actually going through it yourself, you don't always know how much it impacts someone emotionally at
Mm.
work. So, yeah, I think in the context of everything I'm sharing, I want to shine a light on, as I said, how many women probably are going through something like this every day. 1 in 18 babies are born through IVF. So if you
Wow.
think about that, assume it's a couple. Some are
Yes.
obviously single parents, but you could say maybe 1 in 9 people right now is going through it, or have been through it this year. So, while we can sit here and kind of talk about it and say we should talk about it more often, the reality is we don't. And I also think it's important to say it's okay not to talk about it if you're in it, because I would not be able to have this conversation with you if I was in the middle of having IVF or in the middle of having a miscarriage. It's just too much. But to be able to come out on the other end, and hopefully someone who is experiencing that at work right now, listening to this, it gives them a sense of maybe solidarity and gives them strength to talk about it when they're ready. We don't talk about it for several reasons. We don't talk about it because I don't want staff to think I can't do my job. I don't want staff to think that oh, she's getting pregnant. She's going to go on maternity leave. She's going to abandon me. I won't have a leadership team at work. I don't want clients to think I'm going to be flaky and not show up at meetings because I'm ill. I don't want people to suddenly think she can't perform at work. So it's ironic because if you ask anyone, they would say, "Oh, of course we would support you. We would just like let you do you and trust that you can still do good work." But society just doesn't work that way, and that fear of judgment is still extremely strong. Um, I think it's interesting that even through this difficult time, I continue to work to the best of my ability, and if not, probably work even harder because for high performing women, the
Mm.
work is our work is the one thing we can control.
Mm.
And so we lean into it because we can't control anything else.
Mm.
We just go a bit crazy actually. So we'll do even more
Even
emails, we'll
more.
do even more hours to make ourselves
Yes.
feel better.
Mm.
Yeah.
Everything you said is so powerful, and I have that experience of when somebody you can tell somebody like what you're going through, but there can be that lack of empathy whatsoever because they have no ability to even put themselves in your shoes
Mm,
whatsoever, you know.
mm.
And that's what I think, many people think they're being empathetic when they're being sympathetic. Um, and I'm so grateful that you're able to really share the details. Because what you're saying is that nearly 10% of the population is going through IVF.
I mean,
That's
if you simplify the figures, yeah, 1 in 18 babies. So in Australia, yeah.
1 in 18 babies, and if we're talking about the men's cup, it's
If we
huge.
assume the couples, yeah.
And if we assume they're couples, that's huge.
Yes, and there are a lot of men that I know who have reached out to me personally and say, my wife or my partner were trying to get pregnant. They have to turn up to work in a full-time male leadership role and pretend like they didn't experience a miscarriage last week. Um, this is actually a very common story as well.
It's crazy. Isn't it in New Zealand where they've provided leave for if you have a miscarriage? I believe recently in New Zealand they provided that.
It might be in a relatively recent federal thing in New Zealand, which is great. I do think that there are actually quite a few progressive tech companies like Atlassian, for example, that provide miscarriage leave. For me, the challenge with that, yes, it's amazing, but then a woman does have to be ready to talk about it and share and disclose
Mm,
that with their employer,
mm,
and that does open up a can of worms around like, well, now I'm going to be in a position of vulnerability because I know I want to get pregnant potentially, assuming it was planned. So it's still great, but yeah, it's not because it's a choice that some organizations make to honor or provide for, and it's not federally mandatory. Um, it does, I guess, it means that women question whether they want to say something about it or not.
It's very interesting because I'm trying to get my head around this because for me, my place is like it makes sense to create safe environments for all sort of scenarios. So what you're actually communicating is in today's world, for a woman to be pregnant is a threat to their leadership. There's
Absolutely.
still that huge threat to the capacity and capability of a woman being able to function and run high performance businesses, if they're pregnant. That for me is insane.
Yeah, so I don't want to sound like I'm not grateful for some of those new policies that companies are coming up with. I think it's very progressive. But at the end of the day, we're still, in this push and pull between women feeling like they have more support at work through this personal journey alongside their career and the reality of how they're perceived at work and their ability to bring their best to work.
Gosh, there's so much training we still need to do to actually, because a policy is useless unless the community that's part of the policy can empathize literally with the other person's position. Because what you're
Mm,
saying is, if a woman, even if they were to take, let's just say, miscarriage leave, and the organization has created that, but there's still a lack of education that if you're pregnant, it's not going to negatively impact an organization, the policy and the culture of the company, there's a mismatch.
I think what needs to happen is maybe a re-establishing of what's considered performance at work. Because look, if we are realistic, when a woman is going through IVF, it is extremely difficult emotionally and physically. We go through a lot of hormonal changes. We often feel anxiety during this time. And so, yes, there is a chance that we can't bring our best to work, but we do our best to moderate that and still deliver results. When we are pregnant, the first trimester, women are throwing up in the toilets, they feel nauseous, they're falling asleep at their desks at 3 p.m. because so much is going on physically that, yes, it might potentially impact our ability to show up all day, every day. But we show up when we need to for certain, important meetings, and we do our work or catch up on things and still deliver results when we can. So for me, it's not necessarily about like always on, but maybe still always being able to deliver, if that makes sense.
Completely. And I think what you just said, you nailed it. I'm autistic. So by the afternoon, I can't think. I'm like completely burnt out. And I take lots of naps throughout the day. But I am a high performance, business leader.
Mm,
And just because I'm unable most of the time to have a considered conversation after 4:30, and as my husband says, by 8 o'clock, don't even talk to me. It's too dangerous. It doesn't impact my output. Yes,
yeah.
that's what I'm dealing with. But as a leader, I've put things in place so that I can have the output. And also I talk to my clients about it as well. There have been
Mm,
times when I've had clients who may wanted to do late night sessions, and that would be really exceptional. Like when I do that, I would put something in place as well, because by the next day, I just want to be in bed the whole day. It's so draining for me in that regard. So
mm,
I think, this it's unfathomable that I know there's an impact, but we can still have amazing solutions for you to have it, to be able to still
mm,
come into work when you can, do what you can, and the understanding of the things you will not be able to do. There are
mm.
things I'm not able to do.
Yeah, precisely.
That's what we want.
Yeah. And if we take a moment to get like super intimate here,
Yes,
I
please.
think I'll give you some really confronting, an anecdote about my miscarriages. So when I found out about my first miscarriage, it was because I went in for my 6 week scan, and at that point, the sonographer told me that although there was a heartbeat, it was not strong enough to survive. So a miscarriage isn't something that just happens in a vacuum and like suddenly a woman's having one and the switch is either on or off, and then like you change your mindset to from being pregnant to not pregnant, and you get over it. Like it's not like that for some women. In my case, I had gone to the sonographer for the scan, and I was basically told that my baby would not survive, and I had to go back to work out of that, appointment, just waiting for my baby to die. And
How did you do that?
women still show up at work knowing that this thing inside of them is
Oh,
is passing away. And
mm,
I'm not the only one who goes through that. I know of
mm.
other women who've done that as well. And it happened to me twice. So I think there needs to just be like, that level of detail I shared with you is just like, it's not just, yep, I'm pregnant. No, I'm not pregnant. I'm going to get
Mhm.
over it. It's like you wait. You have this impending doom and you just go about your business like nothing ever happened. And then maybe you start bleeding a week or so later. And the time I had my second miscarriage and I went in for that dreaded scan and it happened to me
Mm.
again, I didn't end up bleeding and I had to have surgery to have the baby taken out. So, there are these situations that are happening all the time.
And as you said, that dreaded scan, that's a traumatic experience. That's what it
Oh,
sounds like
yeah.
to me.
Yes, it is terrifying, especially when I got pregnant with my twins.
Mm,
I was robbed of all the joy that comes with a pregnancy because
get it.
you are just terrified you're going to lose them all the time or lose one of them. And I expected one of them to die before they were born, but they
Mm.
both made it. Even though
Mm.
they were extremely premature, but they both made it. So
Imagine. And of course, when you're stressing, then you're telling yourself not to stress so that you can create the
yes,
best environment for them to
yes,
keep them and grow them.
yes,
How did you
yes.
take care of your health, your mental health and well-being and run your business during
Oh,
that time, if at all?
um, I don't know, Rugare. You just do it. I don't
I
know.
think that's the power of woman.
Sometimes we don't have the answers. It's not like cold showers and it's not like, this or that. And it's not like, oh, I have these secrets or these hacks, it's just like, oh my God, I just would go to bed at 5 p.m. Like it just, sometimes that's just the way it is. We figure it out.
Yes.
Um, but
Wow.
before we move on to to another topic,
Yes.
I want to say like I'm one of the few that has a good end story with my
Mm,
IVF journey, and I after multiple rounds of IVF, spending a lot of time and money and energy, I actually had my twins conceived in Athens, Greece. I went overseas for fertility treatment. So typically IVF failures kind of come out of like two, I'm obviously not a scientist. I'm making this up based on my lived experience, but two simplistic buckets. One is the woman, the woman has trouble holding on to a pregnancy. So maybe she has, endometriosis with the uterus and therefore it can't implant. And that is one challenge. Whereas another challenge, which was more relevant to me, was the egg and the sperm don't seem to be getting along, or they do. And then as it develops, something goes wrong and it decides to self terminate. Um, so in my case, we decided to look into donor eggs and sperm, and a lot that's how, same sex couples go through IVF,
mm,
donor eggs and
yes.
sperm. And believe it or not, there are tons of families made up, heterosexual couples that have children from donor eggs or sperm. I am one of them, and we all go to Europe to do it because
I
it
had
is so
no
much
idea.
easier.
That's
It is so much
crazy.
easier, and I would even dare to say cheaper, and easier
Doing
over
it in Europe.
Europe. Yeah.
And why
Why?
is that?
Yes, because in Australia, all donors are known donors. And in Europe,
Mm,
people are incentivized and they're anonymous for life. So the pool of donor eggs and donor sperm is just it comparatively infinite compared to Australia, where you might
I
have
get it.
10 sperm donors to choose from,
Mhm.
as opposed to hundreds in probably the London Sperm Bank alone. Um, so you, you know, I should say, couples such as myself, when we go to Europe, they're able to access these um, gamete banks of eggs and sperm much more quickly and effectively, and they're able to like this is the only instance where I guess racial profiling is okay, but they biomatch your data.
Yes.
You send them photos and all of that kind of stuff. They legally have to create a baby of your own ethnicity.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, the whole process is really interesting, but it's quick, it's easy, it feels familiar. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but it just, I think in Australia, you feel like you're one of many, and I have very big opinions um, on IVF in Australia. I think that it's expensive, it's navigate. There are many practitioners and no answers, and I find that extremely frustrating. And I think a lot
Mm.
of people who have gone through IVF would feel the same. So
Mm.
I wish I went to Europe sooner instead of going through so many procedures. So that would be my advice to anyone who might be struggling to explore overseas treatment if they're open to donor
Mhm.
eggs or sperm.
Invaluable advice. And like that's a whole nother conversation. How do you juggle raising your twins and being a working mom? And I should even say high performance business leader.
Well, I would like to say I do, but the reality is I don't, or we just we just do what we can, right? So
Amazing.
um, one, I would say, so the research tells us that 20% of women in Australia experience perinatal depression. And I was diagnosed with postnatal depression probably about a year after my boys were born. I think for me, it was the first year is a fog, and you pretend that you're not having postnatal depression. You just think you're sleep deprived, and that the misery is the price you pay for having babies.
Mm.
Um, but you then go down this hole, and I found myself kind of the fog was starting to clear, but I was still feeling. And I was asking myself questions like, I never wanted kids before I met James. Why did I do this? I've gone through hell and back with IVF to get these boys. Like, why can't I enjoy this more? Or like, I had so much freedom before. What have I done with my life? You really mourn everything that you thought you had before babies, and you become really guilty that you can't enjoy it. You feel like you'll often hear mums say they've got one foot in the door here, one foot in the door there, and yet they can't do anything well. So, I think that really encapsulates how a lot of women feel when they try and juggle work and children, especially young children. But I actually found that going back to work was fantastic for me, because even though um, I struggle with the juggle, it actually makes me feel a bit more like myself. And like I
Mm.
said before, if you lean into what you're good at, I have control over my work, I'm good at it, it makes me feel better. And
Mm.
it's just about trying to manage how you try and do it all at the same time.
Yes. And I think what you're saying is important because um, I think a lot of the time we have this ideal of what perfection is, and also like going back to the past. Like during COVID out here, people saying, I can't wait to go back to the past. After COVID, I'm like, we're not going back to the past. This is a situation which is changing the entire world, and it's going to move us in a different direction. But we're not going backwards, as Kamala Harris says. We're not going back, we're moving forward. But um, I think what you're communicating is a lot is the juggle is meeting life on life's terms there. I know my juggle is just showing up at times and just doing my very best and being open with what I'm able to do, not able to, and not able to do, and asking a lot for help. I ask a lot for help. And that's me without children. you know,
Mm-hmm.
let alone you being a high performance business woman leader. It's
Mm.
really inspiring.
Some people ask me like as a joke, "Oh, how do you do it?" And I say, "Oh, I go to bed at 7 p.m." And that's not even a joke, right? Like you just you just do what you can. And
Yes.
I genuinely, so on this topic, on a serious note, I genuinely believe that if like, on my anti-government rant again,
Yes.
if we had better childcare, I think less mums would experience perinatal depression.
Mm.
And this is my big statement here because um, the statistic, the research is actually like 11,000 places are withheld in childcare every week due to the lack of funding of
Oh,
educators. And you know how hard it is to get a quality childcare place? Like you ask any woman who's trying to get their kid into daycare, it is impossible. Like some places have like a year or two's waiting list. And this prompts women to face some pretty big questions like, can I do it? How long can I do this for? Should I just stay at home? Can I financially afford it? Do the dollars even stack up? Because apparently, like if you look at how much daycare costs versus what someone might earn, women are literally sacrificing. Okay, I'll just give you the example before at the start we discussed. If an average woman in their 30s is earning $90,000 a year,
mm.
they're they are earning about $360 a day. Daycare typically costs about $180 a day, which is what the minimum wage is. So a woman is sacrificing half of her income just to put their kid into daycare, and take half the paycheck home after doing everything that they do at the office. This poses some pretty confronting questions around like how women are supported to go back to work. Even though there is childcare subsidy, which I'm not going to complain about, I still think there are some big questions to be addressed. And I also want to look at childcare as not just, hey, this is a childcare centre that is a formal institution or like a location where I send my kids. I want to talk about childcare as like as soon as a baby is born and they go home,
Mm.
things like babysitters, night nannies, day nannies, um, au pairs, because sometimes, like when a kid is because most kids don't go to childcare for a year, if you can get them in the waiting list, within even the first few months of their life, sometimes we just need someone to come around for a few hours so we can have a nap or have a shower. And I would love to see more financial support for women who don't have a village. Like, I don't have any family
Yes.
help here, and I'm still expected to do everything I need to do. And it's not like I have money to just throw at a cleaner or throw at a cook or throw at like, a million babysitters. If childcare in different forms was more readily available and accessible and affordable to women as soon as they brought their children home, I really think it would make a difference with those statistics around postnatal depression.
Completely. How can people vote for you to become the MP or Premier of Victoria?
I don't have time.
I'm all in. I am all in. Educated, factual, your rigorous thinking as well around this, you know.
I think it's just, I've carved out time to talk on this podcast because I haven't discussed motherhood before. Like, I've been on so many panels and spoken about content, technology, AI, education, um, how to rebuild a website from the ground up. But like, we talk about this, it's such an honest and real issue. Um, and there are all the facts that show what women are up against, and yet we still just show up and get done.
Ah, I was talking to my husband. As you know, I love the women in my life. I love my grandmother. She's a pioneer. I don't have this life without her stepping outside, the what men told her she should do. And my mum was one of the first female in the village, one of six girls to go to secondary school. you know, and because of that, she was empowered for her children, to get a good education. And here I am, a migrant in Australia, creating a life,
Mm,
that that is women. And
yeah.
the stakes were so against them at every
Mm,
step of the way. And I went to church with my husband on Sunday, and and I keep still hearing like he did that, the disciple did that, and I was like, there's never ever the conversation of the woman, and I was getting really angry because I was like, wow, I'm a gay man, but I can find myself in the conversation of the man, you know.
mm.
And I was like, how does a woman do it? There's literally no identification, no shared stories, no shared experiences. And it makes me so upset. I'm upset. It makes me so upset. It's awful.
Well, we
And the
can make
other
up for it now, Rugare. We can make up for it
Thank you.
now.
That's why this conversation was so important, because I'm like, we've got to have this conversation because there are stories that are not being expressed in this world, and that's not okay. Yet you are making such a huge difference. You've created employment for so many people. You're making a difference globally, for heaven's sake. And then that these ridiculous obstacles that, if they were removed, imagine how much greater what you've created.
Yeah, well, it's good to be grounded, isn't it? I guess.
I love your positivity. We have gone so much over time. Do you have space and time to go through the BAM lighting round at all? And it's okay if not, we can end here.
Go ahead, and you can
Let's
choose to
do
keep
it.
it or cut it.
I love it. So this will be some of the questions.
Yeah,
What and in these questions and in your responses, you can feel free to keep them short and sharp, and you can make it
yes,
up as you go.
yeah.
What does forging your own path mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think forging my own path means um, something that I've done a lot of, which we spoke about, is a lot of trial and error. You can read as many business books or life coaching books as you can possibly fit in, but unless you just go out and test it in the real world with yourself, you you'll never be able to kind of find your calling.
Amazing. Test yourself in the real world and find your calling, people. We often avoid failure, like many people talk about. I don't want to do this because I don't want to fail. And it's typically associated with being weak and not enough. Can you tell me when you failed and it made you feel weak and not enough?
Oh, all the time. But if I was to call on one specific example related to this topic, it's probably the failure to get pregnant the first time, or the second time, or the third time, even fourth.
Mm,
So women who are trying to get pregnant and they don't, often we feel a sense of failure, like it's unjustified. Like we've done everything right, we've worked really hard, we have tried to take care of ourselves, and now that we're ready, we don't get what we want. And why? Why? And then we start thinking, oh, maybe I didn't do this right. Maybe I'm too stressed with work. Maybe I should give myself more of a break. Maybe I don't go to the gym enough. Maybe I had too much coffee. Maybe I had too many cocktails on
mm,
Friday. So how did I overcome that guilt that would always creep in, that it was my fault I couldn't get pregnant? Oh, I don't know. Just keep trying, I suppose.
mm,
Staying positive is a really tough one,
mm.
because it's easy to say but hard to do. Um, but yeah, when it comes to failure, I think maybe just knowing that that feeling will pass if you can just get through
That's so powerful. Not sometimes, every day I have moments where I feel weak and I'm not enough. And the thing that I feel sets me apart from everybody else is that I still try living my values and still try living my purpose, despite that I still feel weak and not enough. And as you said, the feelings do pass. And I think that's what we don't get to discover until we are in
it.
that situation. It's very
Yeah.
powerful. In Australia, we have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome. We don't celebrate those who are accomplished and we tear them down. So today I want to talk about one of your proudest moments.
Mm.
What is something you're proud of?
Oh, oh, this is such a big question. Um, I think one of the biggest things I'm proud of is being able to say that I've been in business for this long and I've built, clients that come back to me time and time again, um, all without having to be a jerk. I haven't stepped on anyone's toes to get where I am. And I think sometimes that's hard because you get stepped on a lot along the way, but it matters to be kind to people. It matters to treat employees with respect. It matters to be the bigger person in an argument with a client if they're not happy about something for whatever reason. Um, and it's important to know when to just walk away and move on.
Oh, Natalie, it's so touching. As as Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. When they go low, high.
Yeah,
And that's hard. In business, it's hard. And there are
yeah,
many times people are trying to cut corners, they're trying to get ahead, and they're trying to
yeah,
operate without integrity.
yeah.
And you are just a person who is, I'm going to live my values, I'm going to live my purpose with love and kindness. Thank you so much for being a demonstration of being able to run a business for 15 years over
Thank you.
multiple continents, clients all around the world, coming from kindness and love, even when people try to pull you down. Thank you so much, Natalie. So, question for you. You get an opportunity to ask me a coaching question. What
Yes,
coaching question would do you have for me?
I did think about this one.
Uh-oh.
Rugare, think of all of the high performing women you've coached. What do you believe is the one, two, or three key things that hold them back?
Gosh, there is a common thread. The first one is I'm not enough. Every single one who has ever come to me, the fundamental is I'm not enough. So even when they've had the external accomplishment, and they're top in their game, inside they still feel they're not enough and there's more to do. And so that's definitely the biggest thing. And it's not their fault. It's not women's fault. Remember, women's rights only started in the 1970s,
Mm.
and the whole structures for empowerment, we have to have structures for the empowerment of women. We don't have structures for the empowerment of men. Do you get my communication? It's so, you
Yeah.
know, it's so there is more space and freedom for high performance business women. Absolutely. But the environment we're still operating in still makes, I was going to say us, because sometimes I feel like I am a woman too, but makes women feel still not enough.
Okay.
So a lot of the time, the work is to getting connected to the light and greatness already within, irrespective of what others, the environment is communicating.
Hmm.
That's when fireworks show up. Cool. Now the BAM lightning round. The BAM lightning round is one of my favorite. This is where you get to share incredible resources with mind-blowing answers.
Oh my gosh.
No pressure, zero pressure. So, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Um, yeah, tough one, but pay yourself before you pay anything else as a business owner.
I love it. Have fun.
Mm.
Pay yourself before you pay everybody else as a business owner. What is one of your personal habits which has led to your success?
Um, this might be a bit strange and quirky, but like every night before I go to bed, I always just check my calendar for what's on the agenda the next day, so that I'm not wasting time in the morning trying to create a to-do list. I can just get straight into deep work.
I love it. That's very powerful. You wake up ready to fulfill on your commitments the next day.
Yeah.
How are you preparing for AI in your everyday life?
I love researching and regularly practicing with lots of different AI platforms. I guess that's just how I'm becoming as familiar as possible with them. My favorite tool at the moment is Perplexity AI.
Ooh, and what's that?
So think of it as ChatGPT, except it gives you authoritative source links to sources where it found that information.
Which is so good for who you are because that's how you also communicate. You're always fact checking everything you're saying. You come with
Yeah,
data. I love it.
I am not the type of person to make sweeping statements, and when you write content, that doesn't fly.
Amazing perplexity. If there is a book you would recommend, what would it be and why?
If I was to choose a couple of things that stand out in my mind that I've read this year, two books are Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is a book that talks about the art of negotiation, and then the like written and told by a former CIA hostage releaser, I should say.
Okay.
Um, so it's great. And the other book that stood out to me this year was what's it called? Sorry, it's called um, The Art of Clear Thinking by Hassad Lee, and it's a book about executive decision making by written by a fighter pilot.
Wow. I love how diverse your reading is. And I know, like books change my world in a moment. It opens up a whole new way of thinking of things. Which one of your role models would you have over for a dinner party and why?
This one's a real tricky one, but just because I don't know who comes to mind, but probably like Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Oh,
because
we love
you
her.
know she worked from the ground up to get where she was, and she had
Mm,
kids where she was at it. She didn't
yes.
come from like a fancy privileged background and had odds stacked against her. So I'd love to meet her in real life if that was even a thing one
Mm,
day. But maybe even Oprah as well,
mm,
just to see how someone has been able to overcome that kind of an underdog coming up through mainstream media.
mm. Amazing. And for those who don't know who Ruth Bader Ginsburg is, she was the former US Supreme Court Justice, and she held on till she died. She had cancer and went through chemo, but she did amazing work. And she was the woman who actually opened the doors for women rights in the United States of America in the 70s. She was before she became a judge. Love her. And of course, Oprah. There's nothing else to say. We just adore her. It's amazing. What do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for being someone who isn't afraid to talk about their worst, but will always strive to do their best.
It's amazing. I remember when you came back from maternity leave because it was powerful because you came back strong, sharing on LinkedIn. And I was like, who is this person? What? She's had children and she's what? She's working and I was like so taken and I was like, Natalie, it was so powerful. You came back from maternity leave ready to change the world at another level. And so I just want to thank you so much for sharing everything you've been dealing with so openly. And it's of service, not just to women, but all of us. You teach me who I need to be to create a safe and inclusive business, a safe and inclusive community. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom
Thank
today,
you.
Natalie. How
Been a
can people
pleasure.
find you?
Oh, yes. I'm very visible on LinkedIn. You
Yes,
can
you
find
are.
me, yeah, Natalie Khoo or slash Nat Khoo, KHOO. And also, if you want to check out my business's website, just because that's where you'll also find me, it's www.avion, which is spelled AVION dot agency.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your generosity today.
right, Rugare. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Until next time.